Welcome to the Targeted Violence podcast. In this episode, we're actually shifting gears and rather than focusing on targeted violence, we're actually going to look at serial offending. Now, this is a disturbing and intriguing case, and we're going to focus on former detective Paul Mitton's interview of Canadian serial killer Adam Strong.
Do you have any internal organs there?
To my knowledge, no.
No, just flesh. Okay.
To my knowledge, no. But obviously, the plumber called the police.
Yeah. Well, the plumber said he called his boss, and the boss said that looked like human flesh.
Yeah, texted a picture or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think one of the pieces actually, as I remember reading, and I actually saw a close-up photo of it.
Had some pubic hair?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know how long something like that takes. Like the process, that you were involved in, like.
I wouldn't even venture a guess.
Like obviously hours leading into a couple of days, I would imagine.
No, it was all done in one evening.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So the 24th is when you start this. You said Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Are you doing this while it's frozen or is it partially defrosted?
Completely defrosted.
Okay. Now that would take several hours, wouldn't it?
No, not in a bathtub full of hot water.
Oh, okay. Like within a couple hours?
I wouldn't wager. I had to fill the bathtub up a few times. How's that sound?
Keep the water hot?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I should really be talking about that, but ultimately you do have me on the...
Yeah.
There's no getting around that.
Yep. And so, like, this was all one piece, and then this was all one piece?
I couldn't... Yeah,
Really?
Sorry, man. I don't remember.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't important to me, man.
Okay.
I know that might sound cold and callous, but it just...
I just assume it would be like the 9/11.
No, not at all.
You just remember this because it's so, monumental.
I did not feel that way at all.
Well, I wouldn't
Not
say
even
you're...
closest.
Okay.
Not even close to that.
To start the episode off, I want to introduce retired Detective Paul Mitton. Paul worked for the Durham Regional Police Service in Canada for 30 years and in the latter stages of his career moved into the Major Crimes Unit investigating sex crimes before then training as a polygraph examiner and specialising in investigative interviewing. Now, since retiring, Paul has created Eastwood Consultancy with forensic psychologist Joseph Eastwood, and together they specialise in investigative interview training. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
We might jump straight into talking about your involvement in the case and your interview with Adam Strong. So in 2021, Adam Strong was sentenced to one count of first-degree murder for killing one young female and a second count of manslaughter for killing a second young female. So for our listeners that are not familiar with the case, are you able to provide us with an outline of the main details of his offending?
Absolutely. So in early of September 2017, 18-year-old Rory Hache went missing from Oshawa, Ontario. And for your benefit of your listeners, Oshawa is a city within the region of Durham, regional municipality of Durham. And it sits on the north shore of Lake Ontario, which is one of the Great Lakes. And we're about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto. So it's a fairly urban area. And so Rory goes missing early September of 2017. On September 11th of 2017, two fishermen were fishing the pier that is the entrance to the Oshawa Harbor. In the fall of the year, the salmon run from Lake Ontario up the rivers to spawn. So they're fishing one evening on the evening of September 11th, and they spot what they thought was a turkey carcass kind of bobbing in the water. And so they start to cast their spoons out to try and hook this carcass, and in fact, they were successful. And they brought it in, and they had the long net because they were fishing off the pier. They scooped up the carcass and flipped it onto the pier and soon realized it was the actual torso of a female. Uh, the breasts were evident. The torso was flayed open, exposing the rib cage, and there was no organs inside. The police were called. Police attended. Forensic ident did what they do at crime scenes. Um, Witnesses that were there that day were interviewed. The next day, our public order unit, specially trained group of officers who searched for evidence, uh, combed the shores of Lake Ontario and on the perimeter of the harbor. But it was a whodunit. We had this we had this torso in the harbor. We didn't know who the victim was. We didn't know who had done this to her. And that launched an investigative team that was put together. And subsequently, the investigation was kind of at a stalemate because unknown female, we didn't know who we were looking for. Because we had a missing person in Rory, who went missing early in September, investigators contacted her family and took some DNA samples. And in November, we were able to confirm that the torso, in fact, did belong to Rory Hache, our 18-year-old missing person. So the investigation continued, doing some background on Rory's friends and her trying to catch her movements in September. And we caught a break on December 29th of 2017. And there was a house in Oshawa, not far from the police station, in fact. And tenants lived upstairs, and there was a downstairs apartment where a lone male lived. The upstairs tenants had gone away for the Christmas break, came back December 29th, and when they came back, they were having issues with their plumbing. They'd flush things and it would bubble back up and whatnot. So they called a plumber. Plumber came and snaked the drains like a plumber would do to try and unclog it. And as he's snaking it, he's pulling out what appears to be hunks of meat, long, stringy hunks of meat. And he's quite concerned about it. He phones his boss to say, listen, I don't know what I got here. The boss was, said you should call the police. The police were called, and officers attended, went upstairs and spoke to the tenants. And officer looked at the meat that was pulled out of the drains. It did look like flesh. And the tenants advised, there is a guy that lives in the basement downstairs. So they go down and knock on his door. And immediately upon opening the door and seeing the officers there, the gentleman, whose name is Adam Strong, made a statement saying, oh, the gig is up, the rest of her's in the freezer. So the road officer that attended arrested Adam on a charge of murder, transported him to the station. He opted to speak to duty counsel, and he was subsequently interviewed by two detectives from our major crime unit, our homicide unit, Darren Short and Hermano Dorigo. I was away that week at our family cottage over the Christmas break, so I was not available. They interviewed Adam for 3 hours, and he made no inculpatory statements whatsoever. He just stuck to the advice of his lawyer and really said nothing. Now that our ident unit had seen Adam's apartment, they spent well over a month there. In fact, they had a 30-day warrant. They had to rewrite it to stay a little longer. And they seized, obviously, a lot of items from Adam's apartment. There was blood splatter on walls in the bedroom. There was numerous sex toys. There was sex pulleys. There were bloody running shoes. There was blood on the floor. It was a big scene. And the investigative team began to look into Adam's background. And after the interview, I should just back up. After that interview on December 29th, that next day, the charges were changed from first-degree murder or from murder to indignity to a body because they wouldn't be able to prove anything until they investigated it. So Adam was sent to the Central East Correctional Center in Lindsay, Ontario, awaiting trial on those charges. And the investigation continued. Police interviewed Adam's friends that they could find, his ex-girlfriend, family members, and things were slowly getting back to the police from the Center of Forensic Science. Items that got sent off, some of the reports were coming back. And among the items also sent through was a freezer, the freezer that Rory's head and the rest of her remains were found in, which were kind of defleshed arms and legs frozen but missing the flesh kind of thing. And amongst the things that came back from the center were a lot of items with Rory's DNA on it, but then we also had the DNA of an unknown female, which of course concerned us that we'd have a second victim. So the lead investigator assigned one of the officers on their file to follow up all the missing persons report, basically in the last decade. And he painstakingly went through them, and he came up across a missing person report from 2010. And it caught his eye because the missing person was of similar age to Rory. Rory was 18, and this other missing person was 19. Same physical attributes, brown hair, kind of a petite build, and both kind of the same lifestyle. We're sort of between accommodations, a bit on the street, living with friends, couch surfing a little bit. Indication that both of them were involved in the sex trade a little bit and had some drug addiction issues. So they looked a little further into that missing person report. Her name was Candace Fitzpatrick, and they ended up locating her family. And, they said they were very much aware of her lifestyle. In fact, she went missing in 2008, and it wasn't until 2010 that her family reported her missing to the police. But we collected DNA samples, or the investigators did, from Candace's family, and in fact, it was a match to an item of DNA we found in the apartment. So we identified that second victim as Candace Fitzpatrick. The investigation continued throughout the summer of 2018. Into the fall, probably October sometime, I was made aware that they were going to upgrade the charges in the next few weeks to 2 counts of first-degree murder, and that they'd be pulling or withdrawing the indignity charge. And I was teed up to do the interview eventually when Adam was arrested, and then that occurred on November 8th of 2018. In an agreement with Adam's lawyer, Tom Balka, the indignity charges was pulled. Adam was released from the Central East Correctional Facility, and the lawyer was aware, and so I think Adam would have been told as well, that as soon as he walked out of the facility, 2 of our investigators from the homicide team were there and arrested him and brought him into the station. It's about a 45, 50-minute drive down to Oshawa, and that's where I interviewed him that evening.
Wow, there's a lot that has gone into just you even getting to the start line to do the interview, isn't there, with Adam?
Oh, very much so. I mean, when that torso was found, I made myself, so in September of 2017, I made myself available to the investigative team and said, if you want me involved in this, I will be. And so I followed the case with them. They'd have morning meetings every day of the week. I'd sit in on most of those morning meetings just to stay up to speed on any updates and what's happening in the case. And, that progressed right through the spring of 2018, the summer of 2018, and subsequently, once they were ready and consulted the Crown, then we knew that November 8th was going to be the day of his release / rearrested on the 2 counts of first-degree murder and his interview for those charges.
Kind of the worst case scenario in many ways for law enforcement, with 2 victims roughly 10 years apart, and one of those victims, particularly the first one, it really wasn't even known that they may have been killed.
Yeah, just a missing person. I shouldn't say but every parent's worst nightmare, not knowing if she's alive, if she's dead, if she's just moved away somewhere. But in fact, she was in fact dead for a number of years.
So Adam's released from prison that day, and you pick him up, and that no doubt would have also been challenging circumstances with someone that's just been in custody, then they are released, the charges are withdrawn, there's the sudden hope of freedom again, and then they're straight back in many ways back into police custody and being re-interviewed. I imagine that's not the ideal scenario to try and interview someone under.
Well, he certainly was well versed by his counsel. because counsel would have kept him apprised that this was happening. A lot of pressure, I would say, I felt, only because the charges of the indignity charge was pulled. So there was no fallback. If the conviction didn't happen on the murder charge, there was no fallback to the indignity. That was done. So yeah, I felt a little bit of pressure that the interview needed to go well, and we needed to garner some inculpatory statements from Adam. And in fact, we did over the course of the 12 hours.
So what did preparation look like for you, knowing, you've had potentially a couple of months notice that you're going to be doing the interview? How do you prepare for something like that?
It would have been a lot more difficult if I hadn't been kind of with the case from the start, attending those morning meetings. It would have been more difficult because I had my head wrapped around a lot of the case facts. I was aware of what evidence was coming back from the Center of Forensic Science, evidence that I could use in the interview. As that November 8th date of the interview got closer, probably about 2 weeks out, I did ask the lead investigator to assign me one of his team members just to assist in my interview prep. On interviews like this, or really any serious case I do, I like to build a PowerPoint presentation into my laptop, and I actually use that in my interview with the person sitting across from me. And I found that's a great way to introduce the case to the person. It's great for creating dialogue. You really see their interest peaked, just wanting to see what slide you flipped up on the next page to see what they really want to see it. So I prepped extensively, but especially in the last 2 weeks. And fortunately, the role I had in my police service at the time in the polygraph unit, I was a one-man unit. And my role was to assist other regional units. So my job was just to help out. So I made my schedule clear so I could just concentrate on that case and that file as the arrest day came close on the upgraded charges, and had myself well prepared ahead of time. Sort of one of the monkey wrenches in that is I'm a deer hunter, so our deer season is in the first week of November. So I knew long in advance that I wouldn't be available until I was finished deer hunting, and the investigators worked with me on that. And I actually came home that morning from about 3.5, 4 hours away. Left here. Actually, I was here where I'm living now, and drove down. But all my prep work had already been done. It was in the office waiting. I had built my PowerPoint. I had all the case facts were up in my head that needed to be, and started my day probably at 5 a.m. here. Drove down, went home, jumped in the shower, got in my suit, drove to the station. Probably got to the station around noon, and I think Adam got brought in around 3 p.m. And I think the interview started a few minutes after 4 p.m. that day.
Very long day, or long multiple days, really, because then it then runs for around 12 hours.
Yeah,
which is quite remarkable. Now, as part of us catching up today, Joseph Eastwood gave me access to your advanced suspect interviewing course that the both of you have developed, and I was able to look over some of the segments of interviews that you had with Adam, and definitely very early on, he's very, he is himself, isn't he? He's very bold and brazen, and he's making demands very early into the interview. And in some ways, he's got you running out of the room, picking up things for him. And, he doesn't hesitate to sort of make himself comfortable in the room. What was your first impression of him when you met him and you got into sort of those early stages of just interacting and engaging with him?
Well, I had the luxury of, if you remember at the beginning when you asked for a case overview, I mentioned he was interviewed 3 hours the night he was arrested on that for the indignity. So I had the luxury of watching that 3-hour interview as I prepared. So I had a feel for how he was in the room. I knew he wasn't a shy person or an introverted person. So I had an expectation about what type of man I was going to be sitting across from. In the early stages of that interview, you're absolutely right. He had me want, I offered food, and he had a very extensive food list, and drinks and washroom breaks, and I knew he was a smoker, so I made sure there was somebody upstairs had cigarettes available for him, and I'm okay with that type of stuff. Like running around is good. I mean, that's me doing something for him, and reciprocity. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cialdini and his theories of persuasion, but reciprocity is one of them. So I use that a lot in my interviews. I'll gladly get somebody food, and you have to in some cases if it's a long interview. But I'll gladly make a phone call on someone's behalf. I'll gladly take the time to explain things to them. And very early on in that interview, in fact, before I even got to rights to counsel for Adam, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Of course." He wanted to know where his bling was, his jewelry that was confiscated way back in December 29th, 2017. So I spoke to him for about 5 minutes about his missing jewelry, alleviated his concerns, answered his questions. And that's all good because for me, that was all the start of our rapport building process. And, even Justice DeLuca, who presided over the trial, in some of his findings mentioned, we had a buddy rapport going throughout the interview, is what the judge stated. And, that it was a friendly and colloquial interview. So that was kind of my goal. He was a little demanding. He wanted to be the alpha male in the room. That was clear. He a couple of times he wanted to almost dictate where he sat. Wanted the table in front of him, and I don't like interviewing somebody with a table in front of us. And I was upfront with him and told him why I didn't want the table in front of us. It sometimes gives people a bit more confidence or strength. And I said I don't want the table in front between us. It's there for when we're eating, or if I got to set my laptop down for a minute. But yeah, he was a demanding, very I would say aggressive, not in a violent way, but he was happy to talk, but he didn't necessarily want to talk about the case. I think that's fair to say with Adam.
So you probably spent a good 90 minutes just focused on connecting and engaging with Adam. The two of you had a meal together.
Yeah,
How important is that in investigative interviewing?
it's it's paramount. It is so important to try and make a connection with somebody. I really can't stress that enough. I mean, rapport rapport is probably the biggest thing in any interview. I think you need to have rapport and respect. And if you throw those two things together, combine those two things, you're going to garner more information. You're going to get more information out of somebody. And that's always my approach in any investigative interview, whether it's with a witness or a victim or a suspect or an accused like Adam was. So I knew I was going to be nice to Adam. I didn't necessarily want to be, but obviously, given the crimes and the horrific nature of them. But I always go into an interview, especially a homicide interview. You want to speak for those who can no longer speak, so you're doing it for the victims, right? So uh, rapport was very important with Adam. Get off on the right foot. I took a lot of time, like you said. I don't know. It was 90 minutes. I didn't time it, but it was a long time. We did the breaking of the bread with the meal fairly early on in the interview. Again, that all just for me. I think about that theory of reciprocity. I've done all these nice things for him. Maybe he will subconsciously give me a little something back, and obviously, I want that something to be some sort of admission or inculpatory statement. So
Found really interesting in watching that rapport building phase is that you don't collude with Adam at all. You're very clear on your boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay, and what you'll tolerate and won't tolerate in the interview. But it's also very respectful at the same time. And I think you strike a really valuable balance there. And sometimes the risk with rapport is we go too far the other way, where we're aligned too much with the suspect, or we just agree to things to try and create that relationship. And that can be really problematic. Rob Thomas, who I know you know as well,
yep,
who interviewed the
great
Toronto
great
van
investigator, great
attacker.
interview.
Yeah, and we've talked about three key things for rapport. So being able to find commonalities with the person,
Yep.
being able to compliment and validate and recognize the person, so the role of compliments, And then the other part of that is also using humour as well. And there's certainly times across your interview with Adam that you're talking about some pretty full on stuff at times, but there's moments of lightheartedness in there, and I think that that's great. And Adam certainly he really responds to those moments where you do bring some
Yeah.
lightheartedness into that.
And you speak of commonality, Nathan, and that was one of my in my rapport building. As I mentioned, I had just come back from deer hunting, and I know when the investigators searched Adam's apartment that night, at subsequent weeks after his arrest, they found a crossbow. So I worked into the early stages of the interview that I had been up north deer hunting and had just come down for this interview, and we probably had 5 or 10 minute conversations just on hunting deer, and he talked about hunting back in Manitoba where he grew up as a younger boy, a younger teen, and commonality, absolutely. Try and find some common ground. And for me, that was hunting with him. And that went to various other topics. He talked about, we talked about fishing, and he talked about magnet fishing. He's a big magnet fishing fan, throwing out the big magnet on a rope and pulling metal debris out of the rivers and creeks. And for sure. And the breaking of the bread and the meals, and the mutual respect. Absolutely. Um, yeah.
My observation sometimes is that police are, when they're doing interviews, are hesitant to bring aspects of themselves into the interview. And I find though that when people do bring those, traits and qualities and their hobbies and interests into the interview and find a way to foster those commonalities, it just makes the engagement so much richer. And I think it's tempting to just make it focused solely on the suspect, but when you do bring an aspect of yourself into that, I think that's where the rapport really does foster.
I think you're absolutely right. And too many, unfortunately, there's too many investigators that I've seen who are afraid, for some reason, afraid to do that. I've seen interviews, and I did quality control on a lot of investigative interviews in the latter few years of my career. And I mean, some officers won't even shake hands with the person interviewing, and go so far as to pull their hand away when someone reaches out and say, "I don't shake hands with bad guys." And then they're going to sit down and expect somebody to have a conversation with them and disclose things to them. I don't understand how you can't see past the error of your ways when you act that way with people. Um, Clearly, I don't like Adam Strong as a person. But at one point in that interview, he said to me, if it was under different circumstances, you and I'd go out for a beer, wouldn't we? And you've kind of won that rapport stage when somebody says that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that rapport aspect of it, though, was probably part of the reason that the interview ended up going for so long. So it went for 12 hours, and we might come back to the admissibility aspect of that a little later. But were you expecting it to take so long?
I I certainly didn't go into it thinking it would be 12 hours. I've done 6 and 7 hour interviews a few times, uh, but I don't think I had ever done anything more than 6 or 7 at the time. But I think knowing your limits in an interview room, and that speaks to like the individual officer's experience and confidence. But if you know the rules of admissibility, don't create an impressive environment, cover off all their needs, be respectful. If you are mindful of all those things, like I was aware that it can go as time ticked on in that interview, and I knew we were at the 7, 8, 9 hour mark. I was feeling pretty good because I knew nothing had really jumped out in my mind that I'd done anything to create those environments where a defense counsel could raise issues that, the time was a factor, and, I created this environment that was oppressive. Um, I know the Justice DeLuca noted in his admissibility that not once during that 12 hours did Adam Strong ask to go back to his cell or for the interview to end. Uh, but it was noted, and I did some reviewing today before speaking to you, that in the 3 hour interview the night he was arrested, he asked a few times it was noted to go back to his cell or to terminate the interview. So, um, you know, I'll put rapport building as a big factor for that. I really will. That and just the evidence presentation that I did took time, and he seemed to want to see what the police had next. He was really engaged to know what we had next. So, um, at one point, I believe it was at the 11-hour mark, uh, he asked me what time it was, and I think I got my phone out, and which was on silent. And, it was, I think, 3 in the morning, and his reaction was, "Oh wow, it doesn't even feel like we've been in here that long." Which, when he said that, I was doing little fist pumps inside because I knew that spoke to admissibility, and
Yeah.
I knew that counsel probably wouldn't want him saying that at the 11-hour mark, but he did say that. So, and that was noted by the judge as well.
And I think part of the reason that it also went so long was that, Adam's way of engaging was very non-committal. He was a very non-committal individual. He was often cautious, sometimes guarded, and not easily forthcoming.
Very, very much so.
So, how did you work around that type of presentation and engagement style?
Well, I fully anticipated that style, Nathan, just because when I watched and prepped watching that 3-hour interview he had with the other two detectives, he would not answer a direct question. Like if you came out and asked him a direct question about the case, he shut right down and wouldn't answer, and in some cases turned his body away from the investigators or the interviewers. And so I knew that to get information from him, it was going to be like a little winding road of a lot of talking and a lot of stories and coming back to the case. And so, I laid out my evidence in such a way to try and evoke conversation, dialogue between us. And, I talked to him about police techniques, asked him about what he knew about police techniques. He was happy to share. And I just, I think the biggest thing was his curiosity to see what we had next, or what I was going to present to him next. And we had long conversations about different items and pieces of evidence, and in doing so, he, I guess I'll say inadvertently made some inculpatory statements. See, I think Adam was very comfortable talking about the dismemberment part because he knew the indignity charge had been pulled. And maybe he got a little too comfortable in talking about the indignity and dismemberment part because he said some things to me that in the judge's finding of guilt, the judge relied on. And it was things he talked about the dismemberment that in hindsight, I'm sure he wishes he hadn't. Like things like, he talked about her whole body had been in the freezer. And it was when the upstairs tenants went away for Christmas that he thought, this is my chance to get rid of most of this body. So he told me how on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I forget, he filled the bathtub with hot water and brought the frozen body, or what was left of it, and was defrosting the body in the tub. And I thought of that when you mentioned earlier, Nathan, about there was a bit of humor in the room at times. And as he's starting to say that, no disrespect to the victims whatsoever, but I said something to the effect of, I guess it wasn't a turkey you were carving at Christmas. And he goes, no, it wasn't a turkey. And he proceeded to tell me how he had to change the water several times as it cooled off from the frozen body parts, and more hot water. And finally the limbs were thawed out and he could deflesh them with his knife and try and flush them down the toilet. One point the toilet was plugged, so he took the toilet off the housing, was just poking them down the actual drain.
I thought it was also really interesting with your approach, though, to his indirect nature, because there's no doubt the temptation to go, look, we're getting nowhere. We're 5 hours in the interview. We're getting lots of information, which is actually not really any valuable or useful information, and to kind of give up. But you really did persevere. And look, it took 12 hours, but again, that's probably also quite a crucial lesson for police around interviewing, that while it might be empty information, if the rapport is still there and he's still present in the room and he's still engaging, there's value in continuing with that process.
Absolutely. And it, my evidence presentation, my laptop presentation to him, that PowerPoint, I, I don't know the exact time I started that. I would hazard a guess it was probably around 7 in the evening. Interview started at 4. And I'm sure that was still going on that laptop and going through slides at 1 or 2 in the morning, because I would open up a slide and we would just talk about it. And it might just like that started with my PowerPoint presentation started with a picture of the 2 victims on the laptop. And he didn't want to see that. And he told me that. He goes, I don't want to see any graphic pictures. And so I would just explain. I said to him, yeah, well, this is how we got started, Adam, because on, this date, the torso popped up. And he talked about being shocked that the torso popped up so early. He didn't expect it to be found. It was, only a matter of days. In fact, if I can just speak about evidence for a minute, how we know that, we obviously got his cell phone when he was arrested, and they did downloads and whatnot. And I think it was on September 4th. And bear in mind, the torso was found the 11th. On September 4th, they did a download, and there was a GPS track on Adam's phone that they managed to download, leading from his house, going down the main street southbound, right to the Oshawa Harbor and back. So it's safe to assume that that's the day that he took the torso and put it in the river, which flowed into the harbor, and she popped up. So just little things like talking about that. Like I had the map, GIS map on my laptop screen with the yellow dots showing the track of his movements, and things like that led to lengthy conversations. So it really did stretch out the time that we were in the room. But with his curiosity, he remained so engaged to want to know more and more and more.
Yeah, that the perception of the evidence was quite crucial, wasn't it? Rather than
Yeah,
maybe the strength of it, but certainly the perception and the intrigue that he had
exactly,
around that.
exactly. And I kind of, that was my first actual piece of evidence that I led with, because I knew it wasn't strong evidence, really. It was just showing his movements. But it got him comfortable. It got him talking. And then what I would typically do is just, you kind of increase the strength of my evidence till the strongest piece was left at the end of my presentation. And that's what I did with Adam.
There were several crucial moments, though, within the interview, particularly around Adam's acknowledgement of certain evidential aspects. Are you able to walk us through what some of those key moments were?
I can, in no particular order, but and when I say I can, I'm basing this on things the judge said in his reasons for finding guilt. Uh, One of the key ones relating to the second victim, Candace Fitzpatrick, was, as I mentioned earlier, we only had one item with her DNA evidence on it, and it was actually described as tissue. And I don't know if your listeners are familiar with a knife called a Wyoming knife. So what that is, it's only a small little knife about yay big. It's got a very curved blade and a little hole for your fingers to go through, and it's primarily used for taking the hide off an animal and then gutting an animal. So the little short blade, stops you from going too far in and rupturing the sac that holds all the intestines in, say, a deer or a moose. It's called a gutting knife, a Wyoming knife or a gutting knife. So Candace's DNA was found, certainly not visible to the naked eye, but it was found kind of in a crevice in this Wyoming knife, this gutting knife. And obviously I knew that. Built within my PowerPoint was, the kitchen drawer open where this knife was found in its case. And then probably the next slide I had in the presentation was our ident unit having the knife out, or it was the Center of Forensic Science taking the photos, I'm not sure. Then the little bit of tissue circled where it would have been on the knife. So I had all these laid out in my presentation, and I held off on showing any of that to Adam. So he talked to me. We talked about Candace, and I kind of just, in my slow, methodical way, because I know he shuts down if you ask him direct questions, I just mentioned how we had one piece of evidence linking him to Candace, and he was kind of surprised at that there was only one, and he he inquired as to what it is, and I talked around it. I didn't want to say, uh, and probably for half an hour we kind of played the shell game of him wanting me to kind of say where we found this evidence on linking Candace to him, and I didn't. And we just kind of talked about DNA, and he talked about ways that you can get rid of it. And he says to me, I think you and I are talking about the same thing, Paul. And I said, I think we are too, Adam. And I said, what do you call it? And he goes, it's a gutting knife. And so I was, again, doing those little fist pumps inside me because I didn't tell him where her DNA was found. He just told me it was found on a gutting knife. And then I said, had it been in that spot a long time? He goes, what, in the kitchen drawer? Again, he's telling me where it's located. And then he had a big, he was mad at himself then. He expressed anger at himself. He goes, I saw that goddamn thing there. Excuse my language. I'll kind of verbatim say what he said. He says, I saw that effing thing there over the years, and I knew I should have cooked it. I should have boiled it in water, and I never did. He goes, procrastination, Paul. That's why I'm facing a second charge is procrastination. And he circled back to that procrastination comment a couple of times after that. But that was one piece where allowing him to tell me where her DNA was found. I mean, that just gives your evidence way more strength. And the judge referenced that as well, that, Adam told us where the DNA was and whatnot. Another one was at one point, Adam was talking about the conversations he was having in the correctional facility awaiting the charges, and how people told him flushing body parts down the toilet was a stupid way to get rid of body parts. And Adam was saying they're wrong because it's a great way to get rid of body parts. And, the judge referenced that, saying he believes Candace met the same fate as Rory, given the fact that he was so proud that that's a great way to get rid of body parts. So, I mean, something that was just sort of a statement that, you wouldn't think was very damning, or Adam certainly wouldn't think was very damning. The judge put some evidentiary weight on that. Another thing that he said is, as he was talking about dismembering Rory, he kind of talked about how big her liver was. He got all excited. He said, I've never seen a liver that big. And he's holding his hand. It was really big, Paul. It's really big. And the judge referenced that, the kind of the quote, I've never seen a liver that big. Well, I don't know what you, but the only livers I've seen are, I guess, at an autopsy or a dead animal that I've harvested. But so him saying that's the biggest liver he's ever seen, the judge referenced that as believing he has seen Candace's liver as well. He talked about that lying about killing and raping women is the one thing he was prepared to do today is a matter of self-preservation. And the judge actually referenced that as saying it's one of the few things that he thinks Adam said that were truthful. That Adam felt it was okay to lie about raping and killing women. Adam talked about the dismemberment in the bathtub, and his defense had tried to argue that blood splatter we had found in her bedroom, Rory's bedroom, Adam's bedroom, blood splatter we found in Adam's bedroom, kind of on a bulkhead above the bed. Defense was saying that was from the dismemberment process. And the judge didn't put any stock into that, stating that Adam had a conversation with me in the interview room about defrosting the body and dismembering it in the tub. So that took away one of his defense's angles, that the blood splatter wasn't from a striking motion, like a killing motion with an object, versus the dismemberment of taking something apart. Adam and I had a discussion about the definition of a serial killer, and there was talk about whether it's two people or three people, and the judge talks about Adam's reaction, saying that he wasn't looking for notoriety in this. Uh, he's just saying, I can't say that he wouldn't have. Adam started to say, I can't say I wouldn't have continued killing, and then he backtracked and said, I can't say that. And the judge picked up on that and included that in his findings of guilt, that it was an inculpatory statement that he had in fact killed two people, not one.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there was talk about remorse at the end of the interview, and that they didn't have any. He's only sorry that he got caught, is what he told me. And I made some utterance about, two young lives snuffed out, and the person responsible has no remorse. And Adam went on to say something to the effect that I believe I was created. I wasn't nurtured as a child. And I said, you're blaming someone else for your actions. And he said, yeah, they're my actions, but I don't think I would have made them if I had been nurtured. And the judge picked up on that and said, he didn't deny responsibility or remain silent. He acknowledged that his actions, he wouldn't have engaged in those actions had he been nurtured and killed. And he finds that as a response to an admission that he killed both Rory and Candace. So the takeaway from all that for me, Nathan, as an interviewer, is if you keep them talking, there's a good chance they're going to say something that's going to further your case. Because there was no textbook confession by Adam in this interview where he said, I killed them and this is how I did it. He was pretty comfortable talking about the dismemberment of Rory, but he did say a lot of things that he shouldn't have. And he even said that at the end of the interview. At the very end of the interview, I probably said some things that I shouldn't have. And I knew the interview was over then. It was 4 a.m. And I said, yeah, you probably did. I mean, if that was at the 1 hour mark, I never would say something like that. But I knew the interview was over. Yeah, the takeaway is really keep them talking, keep them engaged. And as an interviewer or an investigator, know what you can and can't do in an interview room. And that's key. In a lot of the courses that I would teach in-house in my own police service on interviewing, it always surprised me how some investigators just didn't know some of the simple things that you take for granted that investigators would know. I would pose questions to the class at the beginning. If a person in custody is in the interview room and they ask to be taken back to their cell, do you have to take them? And half the class would say, yes, you have to. Well, in Canada, you don't have to. I'm not sure if it's the same in New Zealand, but if somebody asks to make another phone call to their lawyer, do you have to allow it? And a lot of people think you do, but unless there's been some sort of change in jeopardy, then you don't have to let them make another phone call. So I think just knowing the rules and how to play within them, you just become more, obviously, more of a well-rounded investigator, and it allows you to spend those longer stretches of time in the room where you don't get into issues of inadmissibility because of some sort of charter breach. I mean, that's how a lot of our cases are thrown out, because there's been a charter breach. Either something in the interview makes the interview inadmissible, and you throw out an interview where there wasn't even a confession. I've seen lots of it in our police service over the years, 2-seat interviews where things weren't done properly. And again, at the end of the day, it's the victim and the victim's family that suffer the most.
Yeah, look, there were certainly many crucial aspects to the interview, as you say, that were very evidentially relevant. And we might play now that section of clip of you where you're interviewing Adam about the knife that's found in the drawer for those that are listening to the episode.
Candace's DNA was found, on an object in your house that would obviously lead the investigators to believe that she's met the same demise as Rory. So, and that's kind of that's what brought that.
That's that procrastination issue right there that fucked me.
I
Totally.
I would agree with you.
All I had to do was boil it.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yeah. And I would assume that would have done it,
Yeah, so would I, because DNA doesn't work after it's been cooked.
and, but it wasn't,
No, it wasn't.
and, might not have been visible, but procrastination for.
Yeah, really fucked me up. Yeah, I told you I had an issue. Yeah.
Was there times that you would come across that and go, I really should?
I saw it. It was sitting in the center of my drawer, because that's where my cleaners left it. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot all about that.
Did they move it to that drawer? And
I don't know. I can't be sure.
Okay.
Because there was like a fluorescent pack of light bulbs there over top of it, and I didn't even notice. They threw those out. They were all empty.
Did you go like a huge span of time without coming across that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like years?
Yeah.
Did you ever out of sight?
It never popped
kind of
me.
thing?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Okay.
I think we're both talking about the same thing. I have no doubt of it.
I think we are too.
Yes.
You told me the location of how it was found.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you call that?
Oh, that's a deer skinning and field dressing tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I call it.
Yeah.
I call it a gutting knife.
Yeah.
That's what I call it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was another piece of evidence that created a lot of dialogue that the justice referenced to, and that was we had Candace's DNA on the handle of a claw hammer. The handle, not the head, the handle. And so I introduced this to Adam, this evidence that we have Rory's DNA on this hammer. And he was surprised it was on there. And he's almost mocking me, saying, you've got it wrong. And eventually I tell him that it's on the handle. Because I don't believe in misleading somebody and lying about evidence. I wasn't going to say it was on the head of the hammer when it was on. So I told him where it was, and he thought that was laughable. And he went on to say, well, you think I hit her with the handle and killed her with the handle, and her DNA's on the handle? I said, I'm not saying that at all, Adam. And we went back and forth about this hammer, and he goes, you think that's the murder weapon? That's not the murder weapon. And so, I mean, who else would know that? So, and again, that was in my PowerPoint. I had the picture of the hammer in my PowerPoint, and I had a picture of Rory's autopsy picture of her skull with the hole in it that, could be from a hammer by the looks of it. But it created dialogue. He said something that the judge put some weight in. So
quite a bit of leakage in some ways, leakage of intent and insights into what actually happened, where he wasn't intending though to disclose that information. The judge had very glowing comments in many ways about your interview, and despite it being 12 hours, which is very much unheard of, the judge was quite complimentary and really remarked several key conclusions around one, first of all, how crucial your interview was to determining that he had in fact killed these women or been involved in their deaths. And secondly, also around just the credibility of your interviewing approach with Adam. That must have been, one, a relief, but also, I guess, secondly, quite a significant moment for you in your policing career.
Certainly on a big case like this. And I mean, I think anywhere this would be a big case. Two young women murdered, and just the graphic nature of some of the details. It certainly was very satisfying and reaffirming to hear those comments from the judge about, the interview and how I think his words were, the Crown easily met the standards for admissibility. And again, that just goes to, I think, treating people with respect and spending a lot of time on rapport. No slamming of the fists on the table, no raising your voices, no calling somebody a piece of you know what, shit. Just treating somebody with respect. Uh, okay to have a little bit of humor in there. Uh, one thing I did want to mention at the start of my interview, Nathan, before even Adam got in the room, just when I knew he was coming, I turned the tape on and I looked at the camera, and I always introduced myself, the file number, the case number, the victims' names. And then I said a little blurb, and I said it for the sake of the family that I knew would see this interview in court. And I said, I may say some things in this interview about Candace and Rory that I don't believe to be true. And I'm only saying them to build some rapport with Adam Strong, specifically calling, like, his language, like maybe calling them crack whores or something like that. And I may use that language with him, but I really wanted to make sure the family knew I was only going to do that in the interview to gain a favor with Adam, to make things go a little smoother with him. And I'm so glad that was played in its entirety in court. Where that part was included too, because I certainly wouldn't want them to think, you were being disrespectful to their deceased teenage daughters.
Did you form any opinions around Adam's personality?
I believe he was a sociopath, just very much a narcissist, um, very much a sexual deviant. A lot of our conversation, he was happy to bring up kinks that he had and things that, things that stick in my mind. He talked about, you know what a reciprocating saw is? Or a sawzall? It's used in demolition a lot. It's a blade that goes back and forth like this. Da, 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 da. He talked about modifying one and putting a dildo. He put a dildo on the end of it, and how he was disappointed he never got a chance to use that on anybody. His girlfriend that was interviewed, his ex girlfriend that was interviewed, said the only way that Adam could climax, have an orgasm, is if he was choking me. Like he couldn't climax unless he was choking me. Um, yeah, I would say a lot of deviant behavior. Um, Talked about his love of anal sex to me. Um, and these are all very candid back and forth conversations where, he's asking me what I like, and
Uh,
not quite as graphic when I talk to him about it, but I don't shy away from, because I want to keep that going, the rapport going. Uh, but I'm always mindful that it's going to be played in court, and I want to appear professional as well. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's the topic of being a sociopath obviously comes up with him in the interview, where I think he brings that into the interview and mentions that he believes that he's a sociopath, and there's no doubt that he does have, quite a few psychopathic traits when you look at his life history, and obviously the offending, the deviancy, as you say, and that the grandiosity, the entitlement, the sort of callousness and gross sort of lack of empathy that he has for other people.
The one, you talk about admissibility. The one thing defense brought up, and it was probably the only thing he was really challenging on when I was in court on the stand for that trial. Adam, at one point in the interview, talked to me about. Well, I should back up and say Rory Hache, the one victim, she had a relative. Her uncle is a member of the Hells Angels, and so Rory had heard him when he was in jail that there was a bounty on his head, that the Hells Angels were going to get to him and kill him. And during my interview with him, he brought that up early on about a bounty on his head. But then at some point later on, he talked about, he said, I proposed this to my lawyer, two lawyers actually, but none of them are interested, like about spilling the beans in exchange for some comforts in prison. And I quickly shut him down and said, there's absolutely no chance that you and I are going to talk about anything like that. There's nothing you can offer me where I can say, yes, we will get you comforts in prison. And I explained to him that we can't do that. That's an inducement, a promise, that we can't do those things. Uh, I I believed I explained that clearly to him. The defense lawyer tried to make an issue out of that. That I wasn't clear. I was giving a hint that maybe the Crown Attorney could do something for him, so it's okay to talk to me about it and make some and tell me. But His Honor DeLuca, the justice that presided over the case, uh, said every time Adam brought that topic up, I quickly reminded him, I can't promise you anything. And those were my exact words. And so that defense argument on admissibility was shut down quickly by the judge. And again, it was deemed to be easily admissible uh, at the end of the voir dire. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was very interesting watching that. He's very nonchalant about that, isn't it? It's very calculated. It's look, if it's beneficial to me, then I'll tell you, but otherwise, I'm going to keep it closely held and not disclose
Well,
that.
in fact, it twigged in my brain when you said something there that the justice actually relied on a little statement Adam made around that topic and his findings of guilt, and that by him saying, you know, I was thinking about spilling the beans um, in exchange for, and the justice talked about how Adam had already spoken so much about the dismemberment and surrounding the indignity charge. And the police had lots of evidence on that dismemberment and indignity charge. And that spilling the beans could only mean speaking, to the deaths, causing the deaths of the two women. The judge actually referenced that in his findings of guilt, that statement, spilling of the beans, because we had already had so much on the indignity that would be speaking to the deaths, not the indignity. Yeah.
So you covered a whole range of complex, confronting topics, dismemberment, Adam's range of deviancies, various aspects that you had to disclose about yourself. Were there aspects within the interview or times within the interview that were challenging for you where, you had to be so present for so many hours and to remain non-judgmental to some of this quite confronting information? Was that challenging at times?
It was challenging, but I don't think any more so than during any other interview that I've done. And the fact that, if you're confident in knowing what you can and can't do in the interview room, uh, it sure makes your job easier. And you personally, as an interviewer, have a lot less anxiety when you know what you can and can't say and what you have to shut down. Um, the only thing was when he spoke about the deal, it was referred to as the deal by the judge. And that when he wanted to make this deal about if I get some comforts, I can spill the beans. Um, my radar went up right away when that came up, and I knew I had to be firm and firm and firm about shutting that down. Um, but that in itself wasn't challenging. I just knew I had to shut that down and be very, very clear about that. Um, the graphic nature of some of the things he said, uh, yeah, that's not pleasant. But I mean, I was in year 29 of my policing career by that point, so you've pretty well, you get kind of numb to some of that stuff. Um, you know, uh, on a different level, Adam himself, belching, breaking wind throughout the interview openly. The judge even talked about that. Um, I'm a non-smoker, but we often breach our city ordinance smoking bylaw by allowing people to smoke in our interview rooms. I don't know if that's common in your jurisdiction, but I'm in a room that's about 8 feet by 8 feet, and he probably sucked back, I don't know, 7 or 8 cigarettes in that 12 hours. I don't know. And that's not pleasant. That's tough for me to deal with. But, and I explain that, and I've explained it in different cases I've been involved in when I've been asked about that in court, that I just wanted the person to be functioning at their normal, they're used to having a pack of cigarettes a day and that's how they function normally. I want them to be at their state of normalcy because this is a big day for them. So that's kind of how I would rationalize allowing somebody to smoke in my room. And
Plus his stinky t-shirt.
yeah, you remember it. And he took his t-shirt off at one point, and he talked about some graphic, gross prison things like uh, the one fella in his unit, I don't wanted something, and he was trading with another inmate, but he was trading his tea bags. But first he would ejaculate on his tea bags, and Adam was laughing, telling me how so and so was drinking cum-filled tea bags, used tea bags, but covered in ejaculate. Um, and he'd be laughing away at things like that, and I'd laugh with him to, you know, keep things going. But
Yeah.
probably the biggest challenge for me was letting him think that we were getting along and that I thought he was an okay guy. Like, I mean, that's the impression you have to give when you're building rapport, and that's harder with some people than others. And knowing what he had done and the type of person he was, that was probably challenging. But it's second nature when you know you have to do it and you've done it for a number of years. So I mean, that's
Has has this interview changed your views at all on investigative interviewing? I mean, I know for me, just having spoken with you and now seen the interview, you know, first of all, I wouldn't have ever thought that an interview could go for 12 hours. But, again, it shows what is possible. So, I mean, were there takeaways for you that have shaped your views on things?
Well, I wouldn't say they've shaped my views, only they reinforced the fact that you really got to spend time on planning and prep.
Mm.
If you're doing a big interview, you just can't go in the room kind of cold. I don't think so. I mean, it reinforced that you need to do planning and prep. You need to go into your interview with an interview plan, points you want to cover, even whether that's points for building rapport or the order in which you want to outlay evidence. Uh, it was more or less just to reinforce. It reinforced to do the things that I guess I was taught to do, and that I continue to teach to do with Eastwood Consulting. That you have to, you can't go into an interview without planning for it. You just can't. And the more the more pieces in that case, the longer the investigation, the more planning is required. And again, I know not all officers have the luxury of time. They're busy and they're going from file to file, and I had the luxury of time, just given the unit that I was, the one man unit that I was in. So, yeah, probably. I wouldn't say it shaped me, this interview. It just reinforced that do the things that you're taught, uh, or that you teach if you're in a training scenario where you train others in interviewing. The importance of planning and prep, patience. Patience is key. Making somebody like you. That theory of reciprocity is always in the back of my head, and it always was with Adam. Even when I would order food for somebody, in Adam's case too, you know, I would always make sure I was the guy that left the room and then came back in with food. I wasn't the guy driving out to get it, but I wanted to be the one that brought the food into the room, like I was the nice guy. And just with that thought process that I'm doing something nice for him. Maybe in the back of his mind, maybe even subconsciously, he'll do something nice for me. So whether that's keep talking or say something that he shouldn't, uh, or walk that line a little bit and say something that he shouldn't, it's always in the back of my mind when I'm doing something for somebody in an interview room. So,
What advice would you give to other investigators who are working on, other similar high profile cases or dealing with offenders that are hesitant to engage or they might believe won't confess?
that again, you have to get them to talk. You have to keep them engaged. And we can talk about the old interview techniques that I was taught when I first started out. Given my vintage, it was all about the read technique. The read 9 steps. And I'm not saying they didn't work, because a lot of times they did, but a lot of times they shut people down. It's a very guilt presumptive interview model, and if you're I'm not saying belittling somebody, but if you're telling somebody you don't believe them and this, that, and the other thing, they're likely to stop talking to you. So getting people to engage, being respectful, you'll get zero information out of somebody if they turn their chair in the corner and pull their hoodie up and don't engage with you. You'll get no information to further your case, to further your files. So, um, I think from the minute you walk in, you've got a few seconds to make a first impression. I've always believed that in life and especially in the interview room. Um, even when your investigators are calling people into the station to be interviewed or arrested, even meeting them in the lobby, like for me, it always started there. A nice handshake, and if they came in with somebody, took the time to introduce myself to the person beside them, and if they came in from a different city within our region or from out of town, are you going to wait in the lobby for them if they were going to be interviewed and released or interviewed and not released, whatever the case? Uh, do you know where there's restaurants and a coffee shop? I could tell you, like, I was always nice to people uh, because I wanted them to like me so they would talk to me. And that's not being phony. That's just trying to further your file in the best possible way. It starts with that. So, any advice to other investigators? You know, prepare for your file, prepare for your interview, treat people with respect, know the rules to work in the room, know how long you can be in the room, how you can push things. Don't forget to offer food, washroom breaks, things like that. Don't be afraid to check in with people and ask how they're doing, even if they're under arrest for 2 counts of murder. You know, are you holding up okay? We've been in here 4 or 5 hours. Are you good? All those are big tick marks for the judge when admissibility becomes questioned by defense. Well, at the 5 hour mark, he said he was good. Uh, so all little things like that. And hopefully those are things that are being taught because I know
Did
we teach
you,
them.
yeah, did you go out to pick Adam up from when he was released to custody?
Personally, me, no, I did not go out. Two investigators from the homicide unit went, and I was in my office just doing my last minute prep. And as I mentioned, I think I got to the station around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and Adam's interview started at 4. Or maybe it was a little earlier I got there, but no, I didn't go. The funny thing is, I did see Adam, but never spoke to him prior to this. Um, I believe that Darren Short, the lead investigator, went up with Adam, or sorry, went up to the Central East Correction Center when he was in custody on the indignity charge. And he went up with one of our members of our ident unit because they had a judge's order or warrant to do a DNA sample, to get a DNA sample from Adam while he was in custody. And I was asked to tag along in case Adam wanted to talk at that point while he was in custody. So I saw him from across the hall, but he didn't want to talk to anybody. So I only laid eyes on him. I never spoke to him. So the first time I met Adam was actually as he walked in the room, and I said, "Adam, nice to meet you." And that was our first meeting.
With your interviewing in those sort of major crime cases, the engagement aspect of that though, would your interviews often start, or I guess the engagement phase start once the person arrived in the interview room, or would it be common practice for you to go out, pick them up, engage with them in the early stages, on the car ride back, and then continue that into the interview room, or were you mainly starting once they hit the interview room?
I think once my career took me to major crime, it was mostly having the uniform officers bring somebody in to, like, if there, can you go arrest this guy? Here's the case. And I would even go like usually you would arrange that to your communications branch with your police service, and I would always talk to the communications branch and say, "Could you have that officers you assigned to do that detail call me before they go there?" Because I wanted to tell them to treat this guy nice and be nice to this guy. They see what the charges are. They might not. They might be charged as sex crimes against a child or whatever, because I worked in our sex crimes unit for years. But I would actually have them call me so I could say, "Can you be nice to this guy? Because it's probably going to pay off for me in the interview." I'm like, if he doesn't, accidentally get his head hit off the door frame going in the car, or spoke down to in front of his family, or just be nice to him. Uh, and it goes a long way to helping me do my job if somebody has been treated nice by the police. I mean, in Adam's interview at the start, I always cover off previous contact. And I said, "I understand, Adam, today, you were released and you were picked up by 2 guys, uh, Paul Stewart, and I forget who the other fellow was. And how are you treated? Uh, and he said, good. I said, did anyone make any promises, threats, or inducements to you? Blah, blah, blah. No. And when you got to the station and you got paraded before the cell sergeant, how were you treated in there? I always cover all that out. And then I say, when he says, I've been treated great so far, and that's going to continue today in the interview room. Like I always kind of reiterate that. That's something I always do. Someone's brought to me by the uniform officers or whatever the case may be. I always cover off previous contact. 99% of the time they say they've been treated really good, and I remind them that that's going to continue in the interview room today.
Do you have any thoughts about the lead interviewer going out with, say, another detective to be the
I
person that picks them up and
no
starting that engagement?
no I've done it. I have done it in the past. No problem with that. Again, just make sure your first impression is a good one. And it's easy to be nice to somebody. Like, yeah, you could put the handcuffs on somebody in front of their wife and children, or you could whisper in their ear, I'm going to step outside the front door before I put these cuffs on you so your kids don't see it. And, don't do anything stupid. Like, don't try and run, or I can do it here in front of the kids. But just, yeah, I've done it. And it's just more opportunity to build rapport, really. But having said that, I don't know about how it is in New Zealand or in other jurisdictions. I don't want to be having a big conversation with somebody in the car that I'm going to interview unless everything's recorded in the car, which is easier to do now with digital recorders. But I know there's been cases in our jurisdiction where things that were said in the car weren't recorded, and it's been an issue in court where, you know, did they really say it if it's not recorded? I mean, I assume New Zealand's recording all their police interviews that are done in the station, and yeah, and I know in the States that's still not happening, but yeah, you have to record everything and act accordingly. That's another thing I like to teach is that, I mean, you know that your camera's on all the time, so act professionally, because the judge or jury might see that interview. So,
Yeah. It's a big wide world in the USA with different practices that happen there.
and so many different, like county sheriffs and municipal police and state police and federal police, so many different jurisdictions, and everyone's doing things different. Even in Canada here, there's still police services doing things differently than what I would like to see in the interview world. They're doing things a little differently still than, like, I think it should be a national standard of police interviewing, and it's not quite there yet. It's getting better, but it's not quite there yet.
Paul, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I've taken an enormous amount away from what we've spoken about today, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. Where can we find out more about Eastwood Consulting?
You can go online to eastwoodconsulting.net. My partner, Dr. Joe Eastwood, as you mentioned earlier, forensic psychologist. We have a website. We offer online courses in interviewing. We do in-house courses. We travel a lot of different regulatory agencies we give training to. But yes, you can check us out at eastwoodconsulting.net. Any inquiries, there'll be a link there to send to Joe, and he'd be happy to get back in a timely fashion to anybody that's reaching out. And we teach very much based on some of the things we talked about in this podcast, Nathan. Just the importance of respect and planning and prep and rapport building and evidence presentation and things like that. Again, if you keep them talking, you're going to learn some information. But if you shut them down because of your arrogance or your rudeness or your attitude, then you're not going to gain anything. And it's pretty easy to be nice to people. That's kind of what I say. It's easy to be nice to people. And even if you're not sincerely drawn to somebody, everybody can act like they like somebody for a period of time. And we all do it in the interview room. We act like we like, again, it all goes back to speaking for those who can no longer speak. And I think anybody that's done work on homicide files kind of adopts that sort of principle, that that's what our job is, to speak for those who can no longer speak, or speak for the victims, or in sex crimes to to try and further the case in the interview. So maybe there isn't a trial. Maybe somebody's going to plead out because you did a good job in the interview. And interviews are so important. I mean, you think about the amount of money a big investigation costs. Like even this Adam Strong file, when you think about, say 10 or 12 investigators for over a year, probably 15, 18 months, just the salaries alone in that. And then the people at the Center of Forensic Science processing things. And then when you get files with what we call Part 6 wiretaps and things like that, super expensive. You got people working in monitor room on wiretaps. They're multi-million-dollar investigations. And usually at the end of it is when there's an interview. So on a multi-million-dollar file, I think it's really important that we do the best job we can on the interview and not just, at the last minute, who's going to go in and talk to so-and-so. It takes planning, it takes prep, and, we know better now, or we should, and we teach better now. We teach it because we know it. And I come from, the vintage where I did things differently years ago. I do things this way now. And I can speak to the amount of information that we get from interviews now. It far exceeds what we used to because we try and keep people engaged.
I think that's a wonderful note to finish on, and very, very sound and important advice. Look, people do despicable and horrendous things, but interviewers, as you say, they have a task to do, and part of that is to be respectful and polite and courteous to the person because it supports the investigation. So I think as you outlined there, there's a crucial role in interviewing.
Yep. And it doesn't matter if you call it a peace interview or an orbit interview or whatever, as long as you're, respectful and you build rapport, you're going to get more information. And if you just remember those two R's, respectful and rapport, your interviews are probably going to go better.
Paul, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to host you on the Targeted Violence podcast.
I've enjoyed talking to you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Targeted Violence podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please support the show by subscribing. Stay tuned for more episodes.